scripture reading this morning comes from Matthew chapter 14, verses 29 through 36. Matthew 14, 29 through 36. And he said, "Come." And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened, and beginning to sink, he cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said to him, "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got into the boat, the wind stopped, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "You are certainly God's Son." When they had crossed over, they came to land at Gennesaret, and when the men of that place recognized him, they sent word into all that surrounding district and brought to him all who were sick. And they implored him that they might just touch the fringe of his cloak, and as many as touched it were cured.
This morning we continue our study on troubling truths for modern Christianity. We've looked at Christ and we started to look at masculinity. We weren't able to get through that lesson, so we'll hopefully be able to finish that today. Just as a matter of review here, what we talked about last week was we're the next step in the hierarchy that God has created. God, Christ, man, and woman. We're that third step there. We see that in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 and verse 3. We're the head of the physical family. We see that in Ephesians chapter 5, 22 through 33. We see that right there in the middle of that as Paul is talking at this pertains to Christ and the church. The mystery is profound. Why is it that the husband and wife have that type of relationship? Why is it that the woman is supposed to submit in everything to the husband? Paul says it's because this pertains to Christ and the church. Our relationship between husband and wife is the same relationship we should have as Christians and Christ. If the wife cannot submit to her husband, will not submit to her husband, she will not submit to Christ either, is what Paul is saying. Then we see that we are the leaders of the public worship service. 1 Corinthians 14, 33 through 38. We see that the women are to remain silent in the churches. 2 Timothy chapter 2, 8 through 15. A little bit broader context there, not just the worship service, but more taking all of life. That we see that is because of creation. Adam was formed first and then Eve. And then also we see the fall of mankind in that. That Eve was the one who was tempted and fell, then Adam. So that's the reason why we as men are leaders in the public service. We're the breadwinners of the household. We're the ones that are supposed to provide for the household. I missed putting the scripture back up there, but Paul tells us that if a man will not provide for his own, if a man will not provide for his own, then he has denied the faith and is worse than an infidel. Then we see also that we're as part of the spiritual leaders of the household. Deuteronomy chapter 6. I've messed this slide completely up. Deuteronomy chapter 6, 6 through 9, and Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. We're to be teaching our children, raising our sons and our daughters. I'm all over the place this morning. Sorry about that. Raising our children to be in the nurture and the admonition of the Lord. We are to desire and order our lives that we could serve as elders and deacons. Whether we serve in that capacity or not, that's the type of individual we ought to be. So that we can serve wherever God needs us to serve, however God needs us to serve. And we should be raising our sons to be such as well. If we want a pattern that we need to raise our sons by, 1 Timothy chapter 3, the first 13 verses there, and in Titus chapter 1, verse 5 through 9 are the perfect verses to raise our sons by. Where we are to support our wives. We see that in 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 7. So, with all of this being said, coming back down to this, our next point in this lesson is that we are to discipline our children. We are to be the ones to discipline. Now, I'm not saying here in this that in the home, the mother is there with the children are acting up, the children are misbehaving, the children aren't obeying, that the mother can't apply discipline to the children. But the responsibility and the one to guide that and to be over that is the father. He is the one that is to be the disciplinarian. Now, the mother will act upon by his authority, but it's the father's responsibility. I believe the following passages that we'll look at here will show that. And I firmly believe that no one besides the parents should give discipline to the children. It is not the responsibility of the grandparents to discipline the children. Even when they're with them. We'll see here that the Bible does not say anything against spanking your children. A very troubling truth for modern Christianity. It's not the grandparents' responsibility to spank the children, and they should not. The father should take care of that when he's back with the children and knows what happened, and have a discussion with the child and discipline the child for their wrong behavior when they were with the grandparents. It's my responsibility as a father to make sure that my children are disciplined, not anybody else's. That's my God-given role, and I need to fulfill it. What are the passages? We'll look at Proverbs chapter 3, chapter 6, chapter 13, chapter 20, chapter 22, chapter 23, and chapter 29. Then we'll also look at Hebrews chapter 12, 5 through 11. Then we'll look at Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4. Then we'll look at Colossians chapter 3 and verse 21. And I do want to head back over here to 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 7. That passage there about husbands dwelling with their wives and understanding. Now, what in the world is that going to have to do with disciplining children? Find out when we get there. Proverbs chapter 3, 11 through 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. Do we delight in our children? Are we proud of our children? Do we love our children? Doesn't say anything about the mother. Doesn't say anything about the grandparents. Says the father disciplines the son. Proverbs chapter 6, 20 through 21. My son, keep your father's commandment and forsake not your mother's teaching. Bind them on your heart always. Tie them around your neck. Now again, as I said, the mother it can act upon the authority of the father in the home as they are raising their children together. We'll look, when we get into the lesson on femininity, we'll look more about that and how this comes to be. But notice here it's the father's commandment. Keep your father's commandment. Bind them on your heart always. Tie them around your neck. Doesn't that sound similar to the father's commandment in Deuteronomy chapter 6? To bind them as frontlets before your eyes. To teach them always. The children ought to be taking the things that the father tells them and binding them upon themselves that they may keep them always. Proverbs chapter 13 and verse 24. Whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Whoever spares the rod hates his son. That's some strong language, isn't it? Do we love our children? Discipline them. He who loves him is diligent to discipline him. That diligence there means this is not just when they get on our last nerve. This is not just when we've counted to 3, one too many times. Diligently. It takes being diligent about this. Sometimes, yes, we are disciplining them over and over and over again for the same thing. Trying to teach them a lesson. Maybe we're trying different things. We've spanked them. We've taken things away. We've done all kinds of different stuff trying to teach them this lesson. And we're discouraged by it. Maybe we've spent hours on the phone with our own parents, calling them, asking, what do I do about this? But you can't give up. The father must discipline the child. Keep continuing on here. Proverbs chapter 19 and verse 18. Discipline your son, for there is hope do not set your heart on putting him to death. There were commandments under the law of Moses, as Solomon is writing these things, where a disobedient child would be taken out and stoned to death. Discipline your son, for there is hope. Do not set your heart on putting him to death. Don't let your children get to the point where they're going to be stoned under the law of Moses. That's what Solomon's saying. Discipline the son, for there's hope. There's hope for this. If you will do your responsibility, if you will do your job, there is hope for your children. But we've got to do our job. Proverbs chapter 20 and verse 30. Blows that wound cleanse away evil. Strokes make clean the innermost part. Blows that wound. Sometimes it's good for us to be wounded by our family and friends. Sometimes it's good to get a slap in the face with a good dose of reality. Blows that wound cleanse away evil. Strokes make clean the innermost part. Our discipline must be painful. Our discipline must hurt. I'm not just talking about physical pain, obviously. Sometimes a spanking, sometimes it requires other things. I'm not just talking about physical pain. The worst thing somebody can do for a child today is this nonsense called gentle parenting. I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to go sit over there. You need to stop that. Over and over. You need to stop. You need to stop. You can't be doing that. No, that's not how we act. The worst thing we can do as parents is gentle parenting. Blows that wound. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6. Train up a child in the way that he should go. And when he is old, he will not depart from it. How many of us have said, either to them or about them, that we are thankful for the way that our parents raised us? Train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. There is hope for our children. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 15. Folly is bound up in the heart of a child, but the rod of discipline drives it far from him. We're going to look later on at what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 about when I was a child, I spake as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. How are we as men able to put away childish things? How do we as men know how to act as men and as an adult? It's because the folly was driven out of us. This discipline, and we're looking at these things in the light of punishment. You've done something wrong, now you must face the consequences of doing something wrong. But what about that Deuteronomy chapter 6, where all the time, not just when the child is acted up, not just when the child was wrong, but all the time, are we taking opportunities to train and to teach our son? Son, this is what a man does. Son, this is how a man acts. Son, what do you know about this Bible passage? Why do you think we do some of these things? Are we providing the example that our son, the discipline is instruction. It is teaching. When they go to school, they are being disciplined. They're being disciplined in reading, writing, and arithmetic, right? This is the same thing for us. At all times, we are to be disciplining them, not just correcting them or punishing them, but teaching them at all times as well. Proverbs 23, 13 through 15, do not withhold discipline from a child. And this is the passage for a lot of new parents today. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with the rod, you will save his soul from Sheol. The rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If we tell our child no, he will not die. We will not warp their personalities. Discipline you, son, and he will give you rest. He will give delight to your heart. Proverbs 29 and verse 17. Now Ephesians 6 and verse 4. Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. I want to go on and take Colossians 3:21 with this. Fathers, do not provoke your children, lest they become discouraged. When I said earlier about disciplining our children, and we don't do it just because they got on our last nerves, or just because we counted to 3 too many times, or just because we're just lashing out at them in anger over something, lest they become discouraged. Now, we're not wanting, they're going to be upset over punishment. They're going to be upset when they're told no, when they can't do something. That's not what this is talking about. What this is talking about is what we said earlier. Aren't we thankful for the way that our parents raised us? Are we thankful for that? What was the relationship that we had with our parents? Do we wish our fathers would have done something different? Our parents would have done something different with us? Do we wish, or are we thankful that they did great with us? Yes, we're all going to make mistakes, and we admit that. Our parents aren't perfect, and we're not going to be perfect, but are we doing our best? That's what this is here. We don't want regrets in our children over our actions, over the things that we have done. Fathers, it's our responsibility to bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. We looked at this passage last couple lessons ago with Christ and how he disciplines us. Hebrews chapter 5, 12 through 11. Have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? My son, do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. We read that passage earlier from Proverbs, didn't we? For the Lord disciplines the one he loves and chastises every son whom he receives. It is for discipline that you have to endure. The things that you face, it's for discipline. God is treating you as sons. For what son is there whom his father does not discipline? If you're left without discipline, in which all have participated, then you are illegitimate children and not sons. Besides this, we've had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? For they disciplined us for a short time, as it seemed best to them, but he disciplines us for our own good, that we may share his holiness. For the moment all discipline seems painful rather than pleasant, but later it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Have you forgotten the exhortation that addresses you as sons? Do not regard lightly the discipline of the Lord, nor be weary when reproved by him. The Lord disciplines us, and we, as fathers, should follow that pattern. Do we not love our sons? Do we want them to be illegitimate children? Discipline. We've had earthly fathers who disciplined us, and we respected them. Shall we not much more be subject to the Father of spirits and live? They disciplined us for a short time as it seemed best to them. It is our responsibility to train up our children as we see best. We need to be letting the scriptures guide what is best, obviously, but we need to train up our children. These passages just impress upon us here, it is my responsibility. It's not the responsibility, as we said, of grandparents. It's not the responsibility of the mother to discipline the children. I need to be setting that up. I need to be the one to decide how our children are going to be disciplined. I need to be the one directing how that discipline is applied. Whether it be punishment or whether it be training, I need to be the one that is doing it. Now, as we said, by extension, the mother is going to take care of things at home, and there really isn't anything wrong with that. We'll get to that in our next lessons. But like our late president said, the buck stops here. The buck stops here. It is my responsibility. 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 7. Likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. We talked about this last week, and we said, what has the woman done for us? The woman has removed herself, or the father of that woman has taken her and gave her under the authority of her husband. We have that ceremony in our weddings where the father who gives this woman to this man? Her mother and I, right? That woman has taken your name upon herself. That woman has placed her physical, her mental, and her spiritual health under my responsibility, under my care, showing honor to her husband, relying upon him, submitting to him. I am the weaker vessel, you are the stronger. Live with your wives in an understanding way. They are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. Now, how does this apply to discipline with our children? Fathers, if we have sons, they need to be honorable men, that when they choose a wife and her parents give her over to your care, or to your son's care, they're honorable men who will cherish that soul. Fathers with daughters, it is your responsibility to have the heart of your daughter, so that as she is preparing to go into marriage, that she respects your opinion and your decision on that. This is not the man for you. This is not the man that's going to look out after your physical, your mental, and your spiritual health. This is not the man that's going to dwell with you in an understanding way. Or, this is the man. This is the man that I feel good about giving you over to his authority. It's a great responsibility. We must dwell in an understanding way. We must be the example to our children, to our sons of the right man, of what that man should look like, and to our daughters of what type of man they should give themselves to. We are the head of the physical family. We are the leaders in the public worship. We are the breadwinners. We are the spiritual leaders of the household. We're to desire to order our lives to be elders and deacons, and should raise our sons to be such. We're to support our wives. We are the disciplinarian. We need to act like men. What does it mean to quit ye like men, or act like men? We'll get to that passage in 1 Corinthians 16 and verse 13 here in just a moment. But first, 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 11. We made mention of this just a moment ago. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. Here's a quote I found about this online, and I'll read a little bit more from his article here in just a moment. But this verse really does present the entire case for biblical manhood in two words: grow and up. That's right. I said it. We need to grow up. We need to stop acting like a battalion of lily flowers We need to stop thinking in childish ways and eliminate the immaturity in our speech and step into the real world of maturity that God designed us to live in. I love that quote. I love that quote. A battalion of lily flowers. As I was, we need to raise our boys to be men. Now, be watchful. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong. Let all that you do be done in love. Let's look at 5 essential qualities in the remaining time that we have of biblical manhood. First off, there from 1 Corinthians chapter 16 and verse 13, to be alert. Now this is talking about elders. Be alert over the congregation. This is talking about husbands, to be alert for the things that are happening in our marriage. How are we taking care of our wife? Is our wife, how is her health? What about fathers? Are we alert to the things that are happening to our children, to the influences over our children, to the interests of our children, to the spiritual health of our children? Are we alert spiritually? Are we alert physically? We're the provider for our family, spiritually and physically. We're the spiritual safety of our family. We're the first line of defense for our family, spiritually and physically speaking. Are we alert? Second is to stand firm in the faith. This requires us to have faith in the first place, doesn't it? What do we believe? Stand firm in the faith. It requires physical strength. Sometimes we just have to grow up. Sometimes we just have to suck it up. Yes, we're tired. We may be sick. Yes, we may be hurting. That doesn't mean we shirk our responsibility and leave it to others. It requires imparting that physical strength and that spiritual strength onto our wives and also onto our children. Act like men. How we clothe and groom ourselves, how we work, how we love, how we play, chivalry. This ought not be dead, right? What about manners? We're not Neanderthals. It's not unmanly to know good manners. At the table, in the homes, around others. It's not unmanly to know how to eat cleanly. It's not unmanly to know how to treat a woman with respect. So many other things fall under that category, but our time is swiftly getting away from me. Knights. I have that up there because can we imagine the knights of old, the disdain that they would have over our men today? What the society wants mankind to be like? We're losing a battle. We're losing a battle. But you know what? We are warriors. And David writes that his arrows are in the hand of a mighty man. So are children of the youth. We're fighting a battle. And our weapons for the battle over this society is our children. They're our arrows that we shoot forth, that we shoot out, that we strike at the enemy with. We prepare our children to be the next generation of Christians. And if our children aren't prepared, then we have failed. Are we fighting? Let me step out of the Bible here for just a moment and get real. And as I was preparing this next slide, this will probably step on some toes. This might make some people angry. This might not sit well with some. But either way, these are some thoughts that was running through my mind here, and I decided to go ahead and include them. Weakness. physically and mentally speaking. Our physical strength will only get us so far. It's our mental strength that counts for a lot in our life. Mentally being able to push through things. We better be teaching our sons to not fold at the slightest little bit of opposition. We better be teaching our sons to train themselves, to build up, to become men, to be strong. Now, I know genetics play a lot into that, but we can do as much as what we can do, right? I remember reading about President Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt. As he was a young boy, he nearly died multiple times because of his asthma. And finally, when he was around 12 years old, his father said, "Son, it's time for you to take your health into your own hands." And they converted one of the upstairs rooms into a gym for him, and he made him start working out. Now, even all the way up into college, he was still thin and wiry, and people made fun of him in the gyms as he was working out. As he tried to play sports, people were making fun of him because he was just this little shrimp of a man. But he continued on and he continued on, and look what he became. All because his father said, "Son, you've got to get stronger. You have to build yourself up." We need to call out the men in our sons. That's inexcusable. That's inexcusable. You all know what I'm talking about with that. I remember one time, early high school, I stayed home from work because I had the flu. My grandfather called me and said, "You can be sick at home or you can be sick at work. You go to work tomorrow." Guess where I was the next day? At work. My grandfather also, to one of my uncles, after he had cut himself and had to go to the hospital, as they were leaving the hospital with stitches in him, said, "You know what kind of example it would be to the rest of the guys if you came back to work?" That's the type of man that he was, but we've got to be strong. This is ridiculous. Our wives should never be able to make that joke about us, that they have an extra adult child. Man up. I remember one time on a field trip, believe it was around the state capitol, touring the government buildings and such. Group of homeschool, all of us together. They asked for volunteers, and I kind of shrunk back. I was a little nervous about getting up there and doing it. And one of the girls of the group jumped up and took charge. And I remember Dad disciplining me about that, about letting a girl take charge and be a leader over me. I've never forgot that, and I've never shrunk away from another opportunity to be a leader. Call out the man in your sons. What about this one here? Can't hold down a job. What do we need to do? Do we need to just suck it up and take a little bit of hardship in order that we can provide for our families? Do we need to, yeah, sure, there's some things, there's some people we don't like, there's some people that don't like us, but if that's our opportunity right now to provide for our family, that's our opportunity to provide for our family. We don't let it go. I like that battalion of lilies, wilting violets. Talking about strength here again, back to that mental strength. That's not manly either. To bully, to belittle, to put people down. That's not manly either. About feminine characteristics. Well, I know we're not all big, gruff men. We're not all like big and strong and buff, and they're, like I said, genetics has a lot to play with physiques and such. 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 9, the effeminate Can't fully explain to you what that means. I don't know why this keeps blacking out on me like that, but well, we'll continue on without it. The effeminate, 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 9, talks about the in a wrong relationship between two individuals. The more feminine side of that is what that's referring to. But why do we allow ourselves as men to get into that position? All right, the fourth point of 5 essential qualities of biblical manhood is to be strong. To be strong physically, to be strong spiritually speaking, to be strong, to be strong emotionally. And we're to let everything be done in love. Number 5. 1 Corinthians chapter 13, 1 through 8. And yes, we will take time to read this here. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I'm a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. If I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all that I have and I deliver up my body to be burned, but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. I'm sorry. I've messed up with my slide on this one here, apparently. All right, love is selfless. Love is sacrificial. Our greatest example of that is Jesus Christ. John 14 and verse 15. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Romans chapter 8 and verse 5, While we were still yet sinners, Christ died for the ungodly. Love is prioritizing the needs of others as being more important than our own. Love sees others' needs and meets others' needs. Men, our families come before ourselves. We make the sacrifices, not our families. Let everything be done in love. This, of course, reminds us not only of what it means for us to be men, but also of the perfect man, Jesus Christ. Christ loved us while we were his enemies. He put our needs above his own, all while dying on a cross that bore our name. He loved us with an immutable kind of love and called us to pick our crosses and to imitate him in the way we love and the way that we care for others. Pick up our cross and follow after him. I'm not talking about our daily struggles, our daily trials, the little things that we face here and there throughout our life. When you talk to somebody in the first century about pick up your cross, they're not thinking about little bitty trivial things. They're thinking about the horrific deaths that they have witnessed in their cities, maybe even to their own family members. They're thinking about a real cross. And we ought to be thinking about a real cross as well. Are we men? Are we ready to sacrifice ourselves? Are we ready to make a difference in this world? We can't continue on the way that we've been. We can't continue on as weak-minded and bodied individuals. We can't continue on not raising our children, not disciplining our children, not supporting our wives, not being the leader in the church, in the home, in the workplace. What is our responsibility? Are we fulfilling that responsibility? It's going to take resolve. We're going to face a lot in this culture today to stand up and to be the man. I'm thankful to God that I'm able to raise my sons in the country that we live in, but also in the demographics that we live in. Because we don't really face as much here in this country about manhood. We're still, these old Southern values are still pretty strong around here, but they're fading fast. It's not like it is in other places of our country, but they're fading fast. Are we warriors today that we're using our sons, our daughters, to fight the battle that our society may stand as a godly nation? What's sad is, when we look at Sodom and Gomorrah, what was he looking for? 10 righteous souls. And the man that should have had 10 righteous souls in his family did not. Lot had every opportunity. He didn't even have his wife's heart. To where she looked back and was lost. He escaped with 2 daughters. But he had others that were married. There were 10 souls in Lot's family. Why do you think Abraham brought it down to 10? Can you save my family that's there? Lot failed. He could not save his family. Men, that ought not be us. Let that not be us. We need to make a resolve today that we will be different. Our invitation song, number 642, not just for the men, obviously, but for each and every one of us. Are we making a difference in this world and in this life around us? What do we need to do to make us, men, stronger? Women, we need your prayers. We need your encouragement, not your discouragement, not you breaking us down and tearing us down, not you making fun of us, not making jokes, not being disrespectful. We need your respect. We need your support. We'll get to you next week, Lord willing, and that one will take several lessons as well.